Thank you, Dean Gadenzi, and congratulations to Jim and Colleen. This is a real thrill. It's really great to be back at BC, and I think the theme of transformation for the School of Social Work is very appropriate when it comes to Jim. I will say personally, Jim's record is incredibly distinguished, and his impact on my life as a career social worker has been transforming, or transformative, I guess. He has helped me every step of the way, both as a social work officer in the United States Army for the last 20-something years, and helped me through my doctoral work. We've published and written and spoken together on things that we're passionate about, and Jim is probably one of the most energetic, enthusiastic people that you could ever meet. His work has touched the lives of so many people. Sometimes people wonder, what does social work have to do with the military? And of course, being a social worker in the Army, Jim and I are politically bipolar. We're a population that is often misunderstood, misrepresented. We have our challenges both in terms of policy, program, and intervention. And Jim is the kind of person, not only is on the front lines, but really is a pioneer in many of the things that social work does, both inside and outside the military. In my culture, being Jewish, we say when you save a life, you save a world. And I think about the lives and worlds that Jim has touched. He's been on the governor of Maryland's board to help veterans returning to the state of Maryland from this lengthy conflict and the generations before. He's helped the Council of Social Work Education develop curricula so that people can go into the field of military social work and be sensitive to the care of people, because we want people to, even if they walk into a shelter or to a primary care clinic, to understand that there's a family like Colleen's family, who also has a son serving out there, who goes through it. I always say we all serve. But for someone like Jim, it's not about just serving, it's serving above self. And so really being a social worker in the military is very, very compatible. And we're dealing with work that is different than perhaps physical medicine. When you have a physical injury, it's easy to describe. If you lose your leg, not that I would trade places with somebody, your appearance rallies support for you. You're treated like a rock star, rightfully so. And people will assume there's comorbidity with mental health and social work issues. But someone like Jim is able to decipher when it's different, when the war wounds are invisible, and when your marbles get rolled around and the gray cells get mushed together and it's hard to describe and hard to solicit support for. Jim gives a voice to that, and he does it at every level. He's an active practitioner, he's a social work educator, he's writing curricula, he's getting out front, he's doing community research, he's a prolifically published educator, but he's also a really great guy. He's got two sons, he's got a son and grandson who both serve. His wife's been with him from the very, very beginning of his social work career, and absolutely terrific and very much a guiding force in Jim's life. And you just can't do this work alone. And although Jim graduated in 1970, I think he still outpaces most of us. I mean, his energy is just unbounded. And I just wanted to do this, and I'm so thrilled that you got this award, Jim. You've changed my life. I always say stand on the shoulders of giants. And that's how I got where I am, and I'm very fortunate. But most of all, Jim is the titan among those giants, and Jim, congratulations. Thank you very much.
That's kind of hard to follow. I am thrilled to be back here after a very long absence, an absence that had little of nothing to do with Boston College. I do attend on TV football and basketball and all the other sports. So and I have my sweatshirt and my cap and all of those other good things. I would like to just use a couple of minutes to be sort of somewhat self-reflective on my own life and just sort of share a couple of thoughts and a couple of names that, as a result of receiving this honor, it's given me a little bit of time to reflect back. And so it's been fun, sometimes sad, sometimes joyous, but I want to just share a little of that with you. I don't know how many of you read the Boston College magazine. Hopefully a few of you. If you read it like I do, you probably just skim it. It comes in a pile of all this stuff, and so that happened to me this fall. And I want to just highlight something from that winter issue of the magazine, which I would encourage. It's online. I'd encourage you to go back and look at it, because I'm just going to give you a fragment of a story. But it's the story of an individual named John Fitzgibbons, who's a Boston College alum. His name is on the Veterans Memorial here at BC. John was a Wakefield resident. He was killed in Vietnam the year I began my master's program here at Boston College. And quite an individual, lived in Wakefield. He went to Central Catholic High School up in Lawrence, and this is something he wanted to do. He used to hitchhike or take a bus every day to go to school, 4 years of high school. He was a star and captain of the track team and the indoor-outdoor track teams at Boston College. Well, in the winter issue of the Boston College magazine, I'm scanning through it, and I come upon a picture, and I said, I know this picture. I know this place. It was a park in Lawrence, and there in the picture was John Fitzgerald, Fitz as he's called, and a guy named Terry Flynn, and they were the co-captains of the cross-country team. And standing behind them, the row behind him, was 14-year-old Jim Martin. And that caught my attention, and I read the article. I had never seen that picture, but boy, I knew that park, and I knew those faces, and it was interesting to see. The important part of that story about Terry, about John and Terry, his friend. When he was killed in Vietnam, he was newly married, and his medals, all his awards, were lost. And the story is about the 45-year journey of those medals that finally, this past year, made their way back to his mother and to his sister. It's a fascinating and intriguing sort of 60 minutes kind of story, so I would encourage you to read it. But what was important to me was remembering Fitz, and the memory, and the memory through the vision of that photograph was important, because Fitz was a runner, I wasn't. And as a freshman, it was Fitz who kept me on the track team, kept me working, kept me motivated, encouraged me at the end of every practice. And I recall 4 years later, when I was able to finish 10th in the state cross-country track event in the spring, that it really was Fitz who was the person who made that possible. Because without his persistent encouragement and his support and just being present in my life in high school, it's something that would not have happened. So that began to get me thinking about this whole notion of people in our lives. I'm in the process of reading Laura Hildebrand's book, Unbroken. If you haven't read it, I would encourage you to do that. I understand it's different from the movie in terms of the depths of the characters, but as you read it, it's very clear that there are important intrinsic things that occur that give us strength and are important in terms of who we are and what we're able to do in life. But it's also very, very clear that the most profound influence in most of our lives are those extrinsic things. And in particular, it's the kind of personal relationships that we encounter, that we strive to nurture and sustain. And it's in the context of those personal relationships that I think most of us achieve the things that we're able to do in life, that most of us use and experience these relationships as a way of sustaining ourselves in times that are more difficult. And I know that really is the case for me. And so as I reflected on Fritz and as I reflected on this notion of support in our lives, just a couple of people come to my mind that have been important influences, and I'd like to just tell you a very brief bit about a couple of them, those in particular that have some connection to social work. There was a nun, Benedictine nun, named Sister Cathan Culhane, who encountered a struggling junior at St. John's University in Minnesota, failing out of some biology and chemistry courses. Sister Cathan was a social worker, practicing social worker, and also an adjunct faculty member. And it was through her grace and support that I was introduced to social work. And I can remember the time, literally a full semester, that I spent with her at the St. Cloud Veterans Administration Hospital. This was before the event of all the psychotropics that make that world different than it was in the 1970s. And being present with her in that environment and seeing her love and compassion and strength and energy, that was really the turning point for me in actually completing my college degree and in encouraging me to apply to social work. And it was with her support that I was able to achieve a Children's Bureau stipend and come to Boston College. If it had not been through her intervention, I never would have made that part of my life journey. When I came here, I encountered two powerful women. One was Pat McGinnis, the other was Sylvia Schroeder. And they were my first and second year field placement supervisors. And from them, I learned now as an academic that it's the field experience that is really the core and central piece of social work education. And I was really fortunate in having 2 stars. And I will forever be indebted to what they taught me about the importance of relationship, what they taught me about forming and building bonds with clients, what they taught me about having self-confidence. I was a 22-year-old graduate student in this program. They, in some ways, performed, I think, some really strong mothering qualities that really helped me during my time here. Subsequent to leaving here and being in the Army, I had the opportunity to complete a 3-year fellowship in Child and Family Studies at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research in Washington, D.C. And I had a social work supervisor there named Gloria Setti, now deceased, who was a BC school social work alum. And Gloria taught me the real importance of thinking about what social work can and does do. She taught me about the importance of collaborative relationships. She taught me about being respectful of other disciplines, things that sometimes I see absent in our practice today. And again, I will forever be grateful for that influence. And I'm sure those characteristics that she presented came from her education here at Boston College. I was fortunate in my military career. I spent 26 years on active duty. I've been an academic now for a little over 20. I was fortunate during my time in the military and some of my time now as an academic to engage with some significant people. I would put on that list General Norman Schwarzkopf, General Maxwell Thurman, and others who really, with the heart and soul of creating modern military, all-volunteer force. And through the presence of those distinguished individuals, I really learned a lot about myself and a lot about what I could contribute as a social worker. There were three other individuals who I have had the pleasure of working with, who are all veterans, whose life stories, not as politicians, but as soldiers and as veterans, I would encourage you to become familiar with. This would include, among others, Max Cleland, Senator Patrick Inouye, and Senator Bob Dole. I've had occasion to work with all three of those individuals in very important projects related to veterans and to military members and their families. And in what I believe were some important, intimate conversations, they were in many ways life coaches for me, and I will be ever grateful for that. There's also a whole array of sergeants in the Army, whose names are too many for me to be able to list off, but I would highlight Sergeant Story, Garcia, Marshal Hagee, Ego, and Kawawa. These are three gentlemen and three ladies who kept me safe, who kept me sane, and who really taught me about what it means to be a soldier. All of them embodying what I would call the soldier's creed. So as I put all of that together, I wrote down for myself a list of a few things that I would say bring all of this together. And these are sort of points that I hope you will take away, remember, and try to live in your own life. The first is showing up. That was part of my coming here today. It's important to show up, even if it's difficult. I'm in the process of recovering from spinal surgery, and this is the first plane ride I've had in a year and a half, but showing up is important. The second is when you show up, be present. Critically important, whether it's in the engagement with your kids, your spouse, people you work with, or someone on the street. Be present. Stay the course. This is something that Fitz taught me in high school. There were many, many days after that 10-mile run that I didn't ever want to do this again. But staying the course is important. Recognize the importance of giving. It's in giving that you receive. And I've tried to make that an important part of my life in terms of my work with colleagues, and especially people junior to me, to make time to give them support to be successful, just as these mentors did for me. Max Thurman, the general I mentioned, taught me early on not to be timid, whether that was in the classroom or whether that was with the politicians, whether it's the governor or whoever it might be. There are important things that you can contribute, and no one pays you to be timid. It's important to do the hard thing, and that means for all of us not looking the other way. You're going to hear in the next presentation about a young woman who's devoting her life in a very dangerous, difficult place in the world, and I would see that as just an example of what I mean by not looking away, by recognizing challenges and being willing to go on and address them. And then I'm going to leave you because this is a Boston College, and I'm a now approaching 70-year practicing Catholic. I was practicing as an infant, and the only public school I've gone to in my whole life was University of Pittsburgh for my doctorate. But I heard a sermon over 30 years ago. It's the only homily I still remember. A 70-year-old Father Lyons came out in front of the congregation. He looked at all of us, and he said, "It's not what you read, but what you remember that's important. It's not what you preach, it's what you practice." And he sat down. I have remembered that sermon. I've remembered that sermon for 30 years. So I'm going to sit down now, but I am honored and thrilled at being here and being with all of you today.